morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nancy Giacalone, and this is 5 unexpected conversations you can and should have at work. For anyone that knows me, and you were wondering why we're all sitting here waiting for everyone to join, that's the hardest part of a webinar for me, is actually counting down and waiting for everyone to join, because I always feel like, what am I supposed to be doing? I'm doing some awkward, weird thing. So anyway, thank you all for your patience while we got through the little intro section. I'd like to introduce our guest panelists today. We have John Troutman with Mazzitti Sullivan Employee Assistance Programs. We have Allison Paoli with Altiqe Benefits Consulting out of San Antonio. Cathy Sikorski, she is an elder law specialist and specializes in caregiving resources. And we have Esther Paoli with Loss of Life Advocates, helping employers and individuals deal with grief of all sorts. We're really excited to come to you today with part 2 of our series of 5 unexpected conversations. Today, we're going to focus on the employer. We're going to really talk to you, any of you that are either work for an employer or provide resources to employers, in how you can help them deal with some of these issues that are becoming, it's not that they're becoming more common. I think we're getting more comfortable talking about them. And the more we talk about them and normalize them, the better we're able to support everyone going through difficult times in their life, and also maximize their productivity at work while they're going through difficult times. So this is being recorded. If you have questions, please pop them in chat or in the Q&A. We will have time at the end. If we see something come up during the conversation and we have time, we'll address it at that moment, but we will save some time at the end to address different questions. So we're going to see if I can share my screen. This is always my next challenge. So, okay, share. Yay, we're doing pretty good. So, all right, so our first speaker today is Esther Cardenas-Paoli with Loss of Life Advocates. And at this point, I am going to turn it over to Esther to introduce herself. If you were not here at our last session, give a little bit of background and then dive into her topic. So Esther, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nancy, and welcome to everybody that's joining us today. We're so excited to share our 5 conversations with you. Sometimes we don't really want to have these hard conversations at work, but we're so happy that you're joining us to really engage and learn from all of us as experts to see how we can help you. I am the owner and founder of Loss of Life Advocates, also known as Lola, named after my mom. I started my company in 2017 after having a very flourishing career in benefits as an account manager for 20 years. And working in the fully insured and self-funding areas of insurance. And what I found was that through my own loss, there were a lot of gaps in our benefits and coverages. And so that is what Lola does. We are here to provide guidance for employees and employers, business owners and families through having some difficult conversations and through a loss or a life tragedy or a life transition. So that's a little bit about me. Let's get started. So let's talk a little bit of the loss of a loved one. Next slide. We're going to be helpful guidance for your employers talking about it today. And I want to break it down because if you missed our first, episode, we were really talking about just loss and mental health issues and divorce and, all the caregivers that are out there trying to work and balance families and a job at the same time. So this time we really want to focus in on if you're an employer or you are in the industry and you are a broker, how can we help you have that conversation? How do we break the ice? Because everybody's talking about it now after COVID and the pandemic. So let's recap a little bit about loss. Employees function less when they're dealing with a life change. That's a fact. They often call in sick to handle family matters. And what are these trends saying to you as an employer? How can you step in and intervene? And what are some things you can do to help them? It's a slippery slope, so let's proceed with caution. So types of losses, obviously the loss of a loved one, a family friend, a coworker. Nowadays they always say for every coworker or employee that dies, it touches 5 people. So we know in our industry, we deal with a lot of carrier reps and employees and employers and their employees. So there's a lot of relationships around that. Also pet, our furry friends that we love so much. And I know that all of us have experienced that and it is very difficult to go through and be at work. The loss of a marriage. Many people don't really talk about this, but in the last episode we did talk about how divorce impacts and affects the workplace. Financial security, this is a big one, especially during the last 2 years with people having to maybe take out loans or having lost their jobs. That can be a big loss for somebody. Going through the empty nest, I can honestly say that my husband and I screamed at each other when my daughter went off to school because we didn't know who we were after 20 plus years. So the empty nest can be a big loss for you, as well as trust, which I kind of tend to put almost near the top. When you confide in somebody that you are going through something, or you confide with personal information and they violate that, that's a big loss when you lose a friendship like that. Next slide. So do you know your employees' behavior style? I really like to dive in with employers about this and brokers, because if you don't know people's personalities and you don't know how to talk to them or how they will react in a stressful situation, especially around the loss of a coworker, of a manager, of maybe somebody that they're working with on a day-to-day basis. So let's talk a little bit about personalities. Our D personalities are about 3%. These are overachievers, the people that don't put their phones down, and during a loss, these will be the people that actually will continue to email and text and post and not leave social media. So those are your high Ds. Your I personalities are your influencers. And these are people that will try to convince you that everything's okay. I'm fine. I'm fine. You'll hear that, but really underneath, they're kind of like that duck on the water. And then there's S personalities. I'm one of these. I'm a 69 percenter. I don't like people to change things on me. I don't like to be stressed out. I like to have things well planned out. And when there is a shift, and we know, especially in our industry, that happens all the time, it can be a little bit unsettling. So knowing how to talk to an S personality is important, and especially during a loss. And then our C personalities. These are the employees that are going to want information. They're going to want to know what FMLA is. They're going to want to know what their EAP plan is. They want to know, how many face-to-face visits do I get? They're going to ask the very minutiae details. And we all know these people. They're about 17% of them. And so I always tell employers, each one of these behavior styles, you react and do different things with them. For a D, you might call if you've heard somebody's had a loss, or text them, and they'll respond immediately. An I personality will probably text and text and text you, or call you and get you on the phone. The S's, they're a little bit differently. You have to proceed with caution with them. And the C's, especially the C's, you cannot just dive into a conversation with them. You really have to ease in and ask them how they're feeling. Next slide. So let's review some STIRBs, short-term emotional release boosters. We discussed a few of these last time, but you'll notice these in your employees if you're an employer. After they've had a loss or some type of life transition, if there's a family situation going on, you'll notice either they used to be a really big eater, maybe they're not eating as much. Maybe they never really went to happy hour, but now they want to go to happy hour just to escape. Maybe they're a sleeper. You see them at work and they're yawning and yawning and yawning. Or maybe they've had too much sleep and they're just really hyperactive. The exerciser, the person that walks in with the gym bag and leaves at the crack of, of the 5 o'clock, woohoo, yabba dabba do, to try to get out to go work out again. And then we have our shoppers. I'm guilty of this. I'm a Amazon shopper. So I will do excessive shopping if I'm not feeling good or I'm going through something. Gambling, workaholism, people that just don't leave the office because they don't want to go home. Isolation, people that want to be by themselves. And then, of course, my favorite, playing on the internet, gaming, or even social media, the people that just never seem to get off. So those are some STIRBs. Those are some things that you can actually look for in your workplace when you know somebody has either gone through a loss, or maybe they're going through a life transition. Their husband's been diagnosed with cancer. There's Lou Gehrig's. There's some type of diagnosis there that they're going through. These are really great key indicators for you. Next slide. So here's something to have in your back pocket. I like to call it the RESPOND method. We work with employers at Lola to teach them and their teams how to react and respond appropriately when they hear about a loss. Maybe they hear about it from social media. Maybe they hear about it from a coworker. Sometimes the HR department or even the leadership team will be the last to know, but how they respond is super important. Evaluating the situation, making sure that that employee has what they need, that you're talking to them, and making sure that the team is supporting them. And on support, this goes a little bit more deeper than just, making sure that they've got family members around them. This is making sure that they know that you've got their back. And then performance, doing a personal check-in. People automatically, when there's a loss, want to check in immediately with that person. We always recommend to give it a little time. And when you do check in, don't just go to the what happened or babe, what's on your desk, and what work is going on or what do I need to do? Don't just talk about work. Ask them, how are you feeling today? How are you holding up? Offering assistance. Can I make phone calls? Do you know we have an EAP plan? Do you know that we have a mental health benefit that we can access for you? Do your children need assistance? Doing a needs assessment of what exactly is on their desk. I always recommend this after maybe a couple of days. Don't rush into anything and asking them, well, what RFP were you working on? What deadline were you working on? Sometimes you can get another account manager or another person, in the workplace to come in and actually sit at the desk and say, okay, based on this, I think we can make a list and determine how we can support them and decide when and where and how you get them back into the workplace. These are all things that we like to talk about, and I just wanted to give them to you today so you can have them in your back pocket. Next slide. So transitioning back into the workplace is one of the hardest things. I can tell you from personal experience, when I lost my dad and my husband 63 days apart in 2014, my employer tried so many things to help me. They got a calendar. They had my breakfast, lunch, and dinners covered for like the first month when I went back to work. I was exhausted and people wanted to help me and support me. But sometimes, it's just knowing the right way to do things. So understand the employee's value in the organization, making sure that they know that they're important, that they're valued, that maybe they just need to take a little time. Transitioning an employee back will take teamwork. If you've got a model system where you're looking at an employee and maybe they're part of an accounting team or they're part of a sales team, making sure that they have the proper timing to come back to work and maybe looking at that team and saying, how can we support this person to make sure they don't feel overwhelmed? An employee may feel lost, not needed, and insecure. I have to admit, this was me when I went back to work. I dove right back in and I just felt like I was not the same person because I wasn't. Offer a structured back to work schedule for the first few days. Make sure that they can go in maybe for half a day the first day, maybe for half a day the second day. Tear them back in and pay attention and ask them, does this feel good to you? Do you feel like you're hitting a wall? What time of the day is that? Schedule daily meetings to check in away from the desk area, asking your employee, hey, do you want to go grab a cup of coffee? I just want to make sure that you feel supported, that you feel like you've got the team behind you, or that if you need to go and just cry, I can give you a safe place to do that. And offer a buddy to assist with catching up in meetings. So I will be the first person to tell you that I thought I lost my eyesight after my husband died. I couldn't see. I'd look at an Excel spreadsheet and I would see the cells just doubling into each other. So maybe looking at that and saying, hey, can you get a buddy for me? Offer that assistance, somebody to check their work so it doesn't become a performance issue. Next slide. So resources to know. Review your bereavement policy. Consider a restructure. Your employee assistance program, John's going to talk about this in more detail. Knowing what this can be so valuable to your employees, what they have and when they can have it and access it is so important. Programs that provide confidential support. That is one of the most important things that employees need to feel after a loss, that they can go somewhere and they can seek somebody's confidence without it being violated. Maybe consider putting an ombudsman for your employees, somebody that is an advocate on the team in your employee's workplace, so that you as an employer don't have to always be that frontline person, but you've got somebody that maybe is trained in how to provide that confidential support. Know your mental health plan, creating a unique offering. There are many times I work with employers and asking them, what is your mental health plan? And does your EAP plan? And those providers feed into the health plan so that we don't lose, completeness around that relationship. Sometimes that's a big trigger for people when they go from having that EAP plan going into their mental health benefits and they're on a high deductible health plan. If they've got that, sometimes they can't afford to pay for that provider out of pocket, creating an incompleteness. Allison will talk a little bit more about that with dollars and making sense of it. And then step in the process for employees getting back into work, helping them and knowing what to say and when to say it. Being patient and not losing patience with your employee after a loss or a life transition. And I think one of the number one things I try to tell employers, anybody working with employees, have empathy. If you can't feel it, then don't try to fake it. And if you're not the person for that job, give it to somebody that can do it. I think the next slide, we're going to turn it over to Allison to Paoli, who's going to put some numbers to this for you. Allison?
Actually, well, yes, it is Allison is up next. So Allison, you're on.
Hello, nice to see you all again. I see some new faces in here. My name is Allison Paoli. I am the owner and founder of Altiqe Consulting. We help employers who know that they have a health insurance problem fix it, not on the backs of their employees. But I am going to talk about the financial impacts of mental health issues in the workplace and talk specifically about some solutions you might already have and some low-cost solutions. Next slide. So last time we talked about the size of the healthcare industry and sort of how that's broken up. So the healthcare industry in the United States is a $4.1 trillion, dollar industry, and Aligning for Health estimates that 80 to 90% of those dollars are from social determinant of health issues, not true medical issues. And we talked about that last time. We used a heart attack as an example about how often a heart attack can be stress related or related to something that's going on at home or something that is not actually your heart is defective. So if $3.2 trillion of our medical spend can be related to social determinants of health, let's say that conservatively 25% of that, or $820 billion, can be related to mental health. And I know that that seems like such well, what do I do with that? But if you think about what you can do in your own organization, you can make a dent in that. And if we can talk about how to do that, and other employers are doing the same thing, we can make a real dent in that number, which helps everybody. So social determinants of health, there are 5 of them. Next slide, please. Genetics and environment and physical influences. Not a whole lot we can do about that other than having a good physical workplace, and I'm sure everybody here has that. Third is behavior, and we're going to talk about behavior today. We're all talking about behavior today, and while ultimately an employee is responsible for their own behavior, we can put good structures around them to deal with some things that we've never had to deal with before. We've all got EAPs. We probably have some services that we don't know about, and I'm going to give you some tools to look for those. Medical care, lots of empirical data that the #1 predictor of a successful medical experience is a high quality provider. By guiding people to high quality care, and that includes high quality, accessible, affordable, and that's a big deal right now, mental health care, you're doing not only the right thing for the people that work with you, your teammates, but you're doing the right thing for your budget. And I think that's really important too. We all work in businesses. The businesses all need to operate and be profitable. And if we can help our workforce and do that in a cost-effective way and perhaps lower our overall costs, that's one of the few wins that we have. So I always try to focus on that. And one of the things that I find most infuriating is that high quality care is almost always, and there is an exception to prove the rule, I know, but almost always in the bottom quartile of cost. So it's an easy thing to do. It just requires some conversation. So let's talk about some resources that you probably already have. Next slide, please. Okay, EAP. So review what you have. So often we think we have one thing and we actually have another. You might have a more robust plan than you thought, or maybe not. Better to know and have some time to make a better choice if that's necessary. You're going to hear from John Troutman in a little bit about what to look for in an EAP to make it effective for your team. As a point of reference, a high quality EAP should cost about $3 an employee per month, so $3 PEPM, or about 2 cents an hour. Considerably less than presenteeism, poor productivity, or just plain old missed work due to an issue that could be addressed relatively easily. Many of you may have a free EAP or a very low cost EAP from one of your carriers, free 89 cents, 29 cents, whatever. while this is better than nothing, a high quality program will give you a solid foundation and may even give you some levels of plan to choose from so you can step that up as you need. And John's going to talk about more of that in just a minute. But let me give you one example. We recently added talk therapy to an EA program. Unfortunately, it wasn't John's, for 33 cents per member per month. And that gave them about six visits annually to full 50-minute sessions with a therapist to talk about whatever was going on with them. That could be done at work, that could be done at home, wherever, but it didn't cost the employee anything. And given the amount of stress that we see with people, that's a pretty reasonable cost. And another note, this is not a commissionable product, or it should not be a commissionable product. This is something that falls under the scope of employee benefits and is something that your advisor should be talking with you about regardless. And given all of the changes in the compensation disclosure requirements we have now, if there is a commission, you will see it. So make sure that if you are paying a commission, it's a high quality product. Next, we've got telehealth. Telehealth can include specialties, and one of those specialties is behavioral health. And that is totally outside of an EAP. You may be paying a monthly fee for telehealth services in your plan. It may be part of your plan if you're fully insured and with a carrier. Double check what's included. There more and more. There's a number of specialties in there, but the most requested is behavioral health. And again, that you can structure that so that the member may have a copay and that will reduce your costs, or you can schedule that where you might pay a little bit higher fixed cost on a monthly basis per employee per month, but then they're getting those visits at no charge. And that is great for people that maybe just have a one-off issue, maybe not related to a death of a family member or a caregiving experience, but given all the excitement we've had in the last couple of years, sometimes people just need to walk through something with somebody, and this is a great way to give them an opportunity to do that. Next bullet, please. So your health plan. There are a number of health plans that allow for virtual visits, and virtual visits are a little bit different than telehealth in that a virtual visit is with your current provider, but is just virtual. And a lot of you saw that with your primary care physicians during the early part of the pandemic. They didn't want to see you, but maybe you needed to talk to them, or you had a COVID question. Then you had a conversation and they were able to bill for that. And the reality is that providers need to be paid for their services, and you need to pay a fair price for them. So by having virtual visits, somebody can use their own provider, have the virtual visit, and it can be a health insurance transaction. That is also very helpful for people and keeps them on track. And finally, I want to talk about communications. And I think that this is the most underrated part of employee engagement. In my experience, people don't find their way to the EAP or to virtual mental health, or even to asking if something is available until they're desperate, and maybe not even that. So if you don't have a year-round benefits communication strategy, consider getting one. We do it for our clients. We write very short emails, and by very short, I mean 2 to 3 sentences. We send them out on a monthly basis. We do have text capabilities if that's interesting to you, but literally it's just, hey, did you know this happened and this is how you can take care of that? And another thing, and I think that John will vouch to that, is the mental health conversation is different with men than it is with women. And if you have safety meetings, if that's your workplace, if it's predominantly male or it's predominantly manufacturing, and you're doing safety meetings, if you can have a male person talk about mental health and well-being, and while we're at it, sleep regularly and exercise and eat properly, you'll feel better. That will go a long way in terms of making those things happen. The time when we could throw benefits over the fence once a year and move on is gone. It's too complicated. There are too many things, and people are just overwhelmed with information. And I do get the irony of giving them another email or another text message, but it's important. So hearing about it in simple ways can make it less scary, which is ideally what you want to do. And now I want to go back and talk about those savings. That $4.1 trillion breaks down into $12,530 in medical spend per person, or healthcare expenses per person. 80% of that is $10,024. So that's social determinant of health. And let's say we're talking about mental health only. We're going to estimate $2,506 per employee. I want you to imagine what you could do with those funds if you didn't have to spend them in the mental health medical spend. So if you are an average employer and you've got 19 employees, that's $47,000 that conceivably you would not have to spend. Is there a technology you want? Is there an employee you want to hire? Is there a new resource that you want? Is there a benefit you want to add to your plan that you could do with that? If you're 100 employees, that's $250,000. And if you have 1,000 employees, that's $2.5 million that you could repurpose elsewhere. And given everything that we have going on right now, I am sure there are many things that you want to do that you don't have budget for. So maybe think about offering some mental health services or using more effectively what you've got to leverage those dollars. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Thank you so much, Allison, and a lot of wonderful information here today. And I really want to encourage everyone to, at the very least, connect with all of these presenters. This is such valuable information. You're only getting a small slice of a greater pie that they can bring value to you and your company. I am John Troutman. I am the National Director of Marketing for Mazzitti Sullivan EAP Services. We are a white glove provider of EAP services. And what that means is you're always going to get a caring, qualified, and certified person whenever you contact us, whether that's an email, whether that's a phone call. We are there for you. And unlike perhaps some other EAPs, we are built to be your business partner. We genuinely want to understand the challenges that you specifically are experiencing in your company. So we can customize those things. We are a very robust plan. We are not that check box that has been referred to a number of times in this podcast. So for more information on that, feel free to reach out to me if you'd like, or one of these other ladies in this call. I'm sure we all can speak to this and explain what robust means when it comes to EAP providers. I am a survivor of burnout several times, quite honestly, and I can speak to employers as well as benefit advisors and tell them about the benefits of prioritizing your mental health, why it pays dividends to build and invest in resiliency and to better embrace challenges. And that's why, our next slide, we're going to be talking about dealing with uncertainty in the world and workplace and resiliency. Certainly, we are dealing with challenges in today's world. And our next slide, it can be very difficult to embrace. So those of you who might know me or follow along, perhaps on LinkedIn, know that I am a weather geek, and I do love to follow the weather. I don't watch the Weather Channel. I watch my own weather instruments and weather models. So I've learned this. Change is inevitable when it's regarding the weather. And here in the spring, it can be very extreme. And those of you who live in the Midwest, or those who've been in Texas and experienced severe storms recently, you know exactly what I'm talking about. These things, although they can be generically predictable, you don't know where that tornado is going to strike. So embracing the changes of weather has its own challenges. But for me in central Pennsylvania, having a day that's 80 degrees versus a day that's 50 degrees, that's a different garment that I wear. But when it comes to our business, when it comes to other challenges of life, it's incredibly more taxing on us. And I love this quote here to our left. So when we enjoy the stability that comes with having continuity between our past and future, a future that is familiar, stable, and predictable, we like to feel that we are masters of our own ship, in control of our own fate. And it's so entirely natural to find ourselves feeling a little out of sorts when our future becomes an unknown quantity. I get it that we like to be in control. And from a behavioral health standpoint, that's a natural tendency that we want to be in control of things. So our next slide. Here's what we can begin to do. First off, embrace the uncertainty. Have that mindset of viewing these challenges, these disruptive events, as an opportunity. Because when we think about it, what really is certain in our world? What really is certain? It's how we embrace the uncertainty in our lives that leads to the great transformations of our souls. And I believe this is not just for us personally. I believe in business as well. We can look out and embrace those things. When you become comfortable with uncertainty, infinite possibilities open up for your business as well in your life, being able to think outside of that box. So our next slide. Plan and expect the unexpected. I want to encourage everyone watching this podcast, whether it's live or recorded, as I said before, reach out to these presenters here today. They are experts in their field. Engage them to have a better understanding of what things you need to be looking at in the long term. What are those long-term things you need to be aware of to develop that contingency plan? What about your employees that need to deal with an aging population of their parents? And regarding elder care, what about the death of a loved one or a friend or family member? These things are inevitable. They will happen. Although that timeline might vary, we can determine these things. Not to mention your benefits plan and all that's involved, as Allison spoke to very well previously. So get your leadership team involved in building that contingency plan. Certainly weather can be a part of that equation, but get that professional help, get that expert team to work with you to look down the road. What are the things you need to be thinking about so that you can be focusing on solutions? Too often we are reactionary after something has happened, after a tragedy has occurred, after a death of a loved one, and the list can go on. I want to encourage everyone to be proactive and to invest in contingency planning. Our next slide. How can we do that? What do we do and moving forward with that? So communication, I'm a big fan of effective communication. Oftentimes as a communicator, and I've spoken to groups around the world for that matter, oftentimes when we're communicating, we have this perspective of the individual on the left, that we're revealing so much information. And we look out and we see this audience that they're listening. But truth be told, even though we're revealing so much, and they might be listening to what they perceive as so much, they're only understanding so much. So I want to encourage you as leaders, ask questions. When you're going through a presentation, when you're going through training, when you're going through some type of management meeting, ask quality questions to your team around you. Make sure that you are communicating effectively so they can repeat back to you in their own words that they're actually grasping what you're saying. I love this quote here on the left. The effectiveness of communication is not defined by the communication, but by the response. It doesn't matter how wonderful, how amazing your communication tools are if you are not communicating effectively to your employees. This will build trust and respect. And let's think about this. Regardless of your industry, when things start to go sideways, our natural behavioral health tendency is to fall back on how we've been trained to respond. So let's think about that. And we're going to go to our next slide. Now, for leading by example, for organizations to succeed, leaders need to practice what they teach, right? When we don't practice those things, we can leave people feeling confused, and there can be a lot of misunderstandings. We can be miscommunicating by practicing one thing and saying something else. So this consistency will not only help everyone else be better part of the team, but will also help everyone's resiliency. Our next slide. Increasing that flexibility. Having those sacred cows. And yes, I'm going to go there today. We all have these things that we've done that we like to protect. I want to encourage everyone to make that list. What are those things that you can be willing to let go? Let them go and be out there in the pasture. Write down that list. What things have we been willing to let go or change over all these years? Maybe it's just the last 15 months, but maybe it is 15 years. Either way, we need to move on from those sacred cows, those policies, those habits, and be open-minded to new ideas. Our next slide. Quality trainings. I'm not just talking trainings, but quality trainings. And these are excellent tools to help your employees grow, and thrive. And as a coach of many years, I've used the same tool to train and equip players as well as people in business. And this is so effective. Here at 11 o'clock on that image, evaluate the performance, understanding what's really going on. And from that, identifying the training needs you need to have, establishing those objectives and outcomes, what you're actually working towards in those trainings. We do this with our groups at Mazzitti and Sullivan EAP. That's what separates us from different types of EAP programs. Selecting those training methods. Is it going to be on site? Is it going to be virtual? What other activities are going to be involved? We're going to have a treasure hunt later when Cathy presents, so we can stay tuned for that event. Conduct and deliver the training, and then the circle repeats itself to go to the next level of training. This works and it's very effective with our clients, and I encourage you to embrace this regardless of what trainings and trainers that you use. Our next slide. Lastly here today, recalibrating your goals and expectations. As an archer, I've been an experience in time where my targets have had to move along the way. And I had to change and adjust myself to adjust that target that had moved. And also in life, I've had my bow be moved or partially damaged in transportation. I had to readjust my sights. There are times in business and life when a disruptive event occurs, we need to ask ourselves, do we need to adjust our target? Do we need to adjust our sights so that we can get everybody to that same destination? When we apply these adjustments, we also need to include other stakeholders, customers, suppliers, and strategic partners so they're on the same page as well. By making these adjustments and providing support across your organization, employees will be able to navigate whatever challenges come their way, and they will have less stress as well. They'll be better prepared. So I want to thank you all for this opportunity here today. And I believe right now, Nancy is going to take over.
Thanks, John. My name is Nancy Giacalone. I am a benefits consultant located in Gig Harbor, Washington. I own and operate Olympic Crest Insurance. So I'm in a similar space to what Allison does. And today I'm going to talk about relationship issues and abuse. If it affects you, it affects your work. One thing I want to point out is that I'm talking to you not only as a consultant, but also as an employer. And I'm a smaller employer. Our team, we only have 5 people on our team. So sometimes we think, oh, I'm a small business, I don't need to worry about those things. And I guarantee you, they affect businesses of all sizes. So the things that we're talking about today, they apply to everyone. So don't think, oh, I don't need to worry about that, or I'm too big, or I'm too small. These issues affect everyone. So I'm going to start out by talking about domestic violence, which is where I started out my conversation last time. And this is a difficult topic. And part of the reason that I chose to address this particular topic is because we had a situation with one of my employees that was a victim of domestic violence. I did not know how to respond or to react to that because I'd never thought about it. Just as John pointed out, I went into reaction mode, but I learned a lot from it. For one thing, I showed this statistic last time, but I do want to point it out again. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men are affected by domestic use, totally over 10 million people every single year. So you might not think it affects anyone in your organization, but more than likely it does. Now, this is where you're going to have to do a little bit of research. I'm going to give you some tips and some things that apply in my state, which is the state of Washington. But most states require that employers cannot retaliate or discriminate against a victim or a perceived victim of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, I'm going to get this straight, stalking of themselves or any qualifying family member. Again, this is Washington state. Your state may be a little bit different, but some of these guidelines are kind of common sense things, and so you might want to think about it as well. In our state, we must accommodate requests for time off for safety accommodations, as well as for the employees to use for whatever their situation might be, any available and in some cases unpaid sick leave. So you'll need to understand what your requirements are and also what your company policies are. Take a look at your PTO policy, see if there's any flexibility there, or if there's any additional provisions. What's a safety accommodation? Well, if it's a larger organization, it might be a job transfer or reassignment. It might be something as small as changing their work email address or even their phone number that's associated with work because they're being harassed. And then implementation of safety procedures. I know, again, in our situation when this occurred, one of the first things we did was we went to locking the front door. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it did provide that extra level of safety that no one was going to barge into our office. Documentation can get a little bit tricky, but you should request documentation to support the request for leave and or accommodations. You don't need to know details, but you do need something for your records. It can be a police report or court documents. It can be an employee's written statement. Sometimes it could be from a counselor or clergy, something that says this person has gone through a difficult situation. This is what they need to move forward. And here's what you can do to help. So again, you don't want to pry, but you do need appropriate documentation around it. And to support that, respect and protect. You need to respect that person's privacy, but you also need to protect them. So again, a little bit of a fine line of how you balance that out. All protected, sensitive, or confidential documentation, reports, and records must be handled according to applicable state and federal privacy laws. HIPAA, FMLA, all of it comes into play around this. So make sure that when you're setting these policies, you're not doing something that will put you out of compliance with other regulations. So what can you do? And I apologize in advance that my slides certainly aren't as pretty as some of the other ones that we've seen, but these are really kind of important documents or bullet points, and I wanted to make sure that you had a list for when this is over with. So you're legally obligated to create a safe work environment for your employees, but what are your responsibilities when they're not safe at home? I mean, that's a big question. Domestic violence is a dramatically underreported crime. People are embarrassed, they're ashamed, they're scared. So you as HR or employers really play an important role in understanding that their rights and to report these incidents to you. And that's going to be scary to them because it's going to be tough for you to get involved. But going all the way back to the beginning when Esther was speaking, watch for indicators that somebody's in distress. Some of those STIRBs that Esther brought up. So look and see what's going on and think about how are you going to approach that person. You need to be very sensitive and you need the employees to understand that they can trust you, and all of your other actions are really going to lend themselves to that environment of trust. If you have proved yourself to be untrustworthy in other areas, they're not going to just all automatically trust you. So this is an overarching issue. An EAP, you have heard us talk about it in every one of our presentations. And I want to be clear, this is not a sales presentation about EAPs because, as Allison pointed out, we don't get paid anything for recommending an employee assistance program to you, but we believe in them so strongly because for the small price that you pay to implement the program, you are saving a tremendous cost on the other side in lost productivity, presenteeism, absenteeism, the list goes on. And also think about when you're looking at an EAP, is it available to all of your employees? Because if it's attached to something, it might only be available to the employees that have that particular benefit. And would you as an employer feel good about saying, oh, Johnny, who's on the medical plan, has this benefit available to you, but Susie, you opted out because you are on your spouse's coverage, so you can't take advantage of it. That's probably not the message you want to send, but it may have happened unintentionally. So be sure and take a good look at that. And again, you shouldn't wait for an employee to need your help before figuring out what your state requirements are. You need to educate yourself and, better yet, become an advocate for your employees. It's really important that you develop a plan for how you're going to deal with it once it happens, how you're going to approach people, and start talking about it before it's ever an issue. Talk about it in your employee meetings, safety meetings. If this situation ever occurs, I want you to be familiar with the company's policy. Raise awareness of your resources in your workforce without singling someone out. Again, going back to general meetings, just talking about, hey, we recently attended a webinar and want to make sure that you are aware of what our resources are. Review your handbook. This is super important, and have a policy in place before you need it. I would also suggest that once you have written your policy, that you have it reviewed by your local counselor or an employment attorney to make sure that, again, you're not putting anything in there that is going to throw you out of compliance in another area. Well, equally as prevalent is divorce and other relationship issues, and they can have just as significant of an impact. This is a common struggle for millions of workers across the country. Companies need to realize that these numbers represent many of their employees' past, current, or future experiences. Half of all marriages end in divorce. And I would be willing to say the other half might be going through a struggle. And there's certainly a lot of people that aren't married and are still having relationship issues. Understand that relationship issues are not necessarily a romantic relationship. It could be with a parent, it could be with a child, it could be with a sibling, it could be with a friend, but they all creep into work. So for HR departments nationwide, it's always a common goal to support and encourage and ensure the well-being of their employees. But again, we don't always know how to deal with it when those things are external to the workforce. We can't always just tell them to check it at the door. So we need to find ways to recognize and address it and realize there's a very, very fine line between personal life and work life. And in my personal opinion, I believe one impacts the other, and we have to figure out where that junction is, where it all comes together. And again, sounding like a broken record once and for all, provide resources such as a good EAP. Another resource might be some legal assistance. Some EAPs have some bit of this built in, but it might be a standalone program as well. Maybe you have a bank of hours available to people to use. Allow time off. The process takes time, and you need to be flexible, but you need to communicate about that. So sit down with that employee if you know they're going through a divorce and say, okay, what do you need? And then come to an agreement between the two of you. Be sure that you're offering a safe and respectful environment. And if you're not, what can you do to change it? Offer support. Help them change their name, update their benefits. They're not thinking about these things because what they're going through is so overwhelming. I have seen it time and time again where somebody forgets to take a spouse off their plan for a year after they've been divorced, and that's been coming out of their paycheck. So maybe you want to create a checklist to give to somebody who's going through that. Here's things that you might want to take care of as it relates to the benefits through work: your insurance, your retirement benefits, your tax deductions. So again, can be super helpful. And here's something that most people don't think about, but it can also be helpful to collect statistics. Find out how many people are going through these things and tailor programs and benefits to help them. And then gather perspective. Always try to look at it from the employee's perspective as well as your own. It's easy to get caught up in our own seat and not step across the table and look at it from the employee's perspective. And finally, what should you do or say? I did talk about this quite a bit in the last presentation, but your words matter. Choose your words carefully, but also choose your actions carefully. They cannot be in opposition to each other. Make yourself available. Sometimes the first challenge is simply recognizing the signs we talked about. Don't pry. Don't ask for details. It's easy to be all interested and curious, but it's not your business. Show empathy and care, but you do not want to become that employee's personal confidant. Know your boundaries and when to refer them on to other resources. I think this one is hard for a lot of people. Listen first and suggest second. It's easy for us to jump in with a suggestion and say, oh, try this, try that. But we really just need to listen. And then when you are making a suggestion, try to use the word we. How can we support you? How can we help you through this? It's collaborative. It's not how can I or how can you, but again, we can be helpful. Know what you offer. We've talked about this a million times. Know your resources. And then again, going back to something Esther mentioned in the beginning, check in regularly to make sure they're doing okay. Sometimes it's easy to check in right away. Are you okay? And then we kind of table it because we've checked in. But you need to check in regularly, particularly in the case of remote workers where you're not seeing them all the time. And then consider workload, because can the employee handle their current workload? If you think that they can't, you're going to develop resentment among their teammates if they're picking up the burden without having it been readjusted appropriately and an open discussion about it. And you might also lose clients because that employee isn't thinking clearly. Be transparent and consistent. Every situation will be unique, but you want to be comfortable with your policies and be careful about doing something that might set a precedent. Because if you do it for one, you may be legally obligated to do it for others. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Cathy to wrap us up with our topic on caregiving. So Cathy, the baton is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Cathy Sikorski. I am an elder lawyer by trade, but what I do is I help employers figure out the caregiving issue and how they can use resources they have or bring resources in to continue to make themselves attractive as employers and also continue to be profitable. To that end, I am an author and a speaker, and my latest book, 12 Conversations, How to Talk to Almost Anyone About Long-Term Care Planning, includes an entire chapter on work. I want to say something here about when something magical happens. You are all here because the 5 of us decided that we had 5 unexpected conversations we wanted to talk to you about. And I still think these are unexpected conversations, but what I'm noticing is Esther, Allison, John, Nancy, and I each have components to what we're telling you today that all interact and interweave and actually are asking you to do the same thing in a lot of different ways, one of which is change your perspective because these are unexpected, and also maybe even change your ways a little bit. So let's get started talking about caregivers, Nancy. Why do employers need to care about caregivers? Next slide. It's because, and this is from, if you weren't here the last time, this is the demographics of caregivers. I'm not going to read this to you, but you are welcome to take a screenshot of this. You need to understand that caregivers run across every possible demographic. And these 53 million unpaid caregivers are not unpaid people. They're working people, right? They are working for you and they are still caregiving. Next slide. So where are they? Well, over 50% of them are full-time workers. And, you know, I am old enough to remember when 37.5 hours a week, 35 hours a week was considered a full-time job. So this work 30 to 39 hours per week aren't even included in that 56%. So more than 70% of people who are working are, in fact, family caregivers. And then the rest of them are working at some other job part-time. So they're in your workforce. And I want to tell you how we know this other than these stats that are sitting right here. Every single day, 10,000 people turn age 65. And yeah, that's the baby boomers. And we're only in the middle of the baby boomers. We're not near the end and we're not at the beginning, but we're only in the middle. So this deal of having people who need to be cared for or older workers who are caring for their family members is still very much alive and growing every single day. Next slide. So what I told you at the last time we got together was, how do we fix this? And I told you we were going to go on a scavenger hunt to look at the resources. But before we did that, I wanted you, if you were here last time, to think about your corporate culture, what was going on there, because this has to come from the C-suite down and the front line up. We can use what we already have and we can find some new solutions. Next slide. So here we are. We're going to go on our scavenger hunt. Nancy, bring us the map. So here's our map. What's our first stop on our hunt? This is where we're going to find solutions we already have. And actually, everyone here has already talked to you about that. And I'm going to highlight a few more. And then what's the next thing we're going to do on our hunt? we're going to look at low cost and no cost additional solutions, which Allison made very clear is something that you all can look at very easily. And finally, when we find the treasure, we're going to find that there are solutions we can invest in. And I use the word invest very purposely, because invest to all of us means if we invest in something, we're going to get a return on that investment that makes a greater investment for all of us, a greater good for all of us. So how do we do that? What do employers already have? You would probably be surprised. Let's see. Is there something that we actually already have? Yes, we have all of this. People have talked about it today. We have FMLA, we have benefits. The first three, PTO, flex time, and work from home, have been around for a long time, right? I should probably move work from home to the top because of what's been going on the last few years. But even the job sharing and donation of time and benefits, that was something that was very prevalent when I was first in the workforce. That seems to have gone by the wayside. But why? Why can't we continue to use those if it can help caregivers and help our workplace? And then we have benefits that are attached to healthcare, legal benefits where people can, believe it or not, caregivers need legal benefits. They need documents. They need to know that there is stuff there to help them do their job. And then we already talked about telemedicine and nurse navigators, and even long-term care insurance is often a group benefit that some of your employees may have available, and you might want to consider making it available to all of them. Childcare and adult daycare. If you have childcare, you probably have adult daycare, and your employees probably don't even know that. And of course, as we've all talked to you again and again and again, EAPs. So this is what you already have. Next slide. So what's the problem? We've got stuff, right? We got stuff. We can take care of it. Why aren't we all taking care of our caregivers? And why don't we have any problems at work? Because number one statistic right there, 24% of employers don't believe this is a problem. And if you don't believe this is a problem, even if you have solutions, your employees aren't going to know about it. And employees are almost just as guilty because they don't report their stressors. They believe there's a stigma attached to it. They're afraid they'll lose their job or their promotions, or they'll be looked upon as, not a team player. These are the problems combined from both the employer and employee perspective that make them not use the solutions that you already have, and in fact, may already be paying for. And there is, in fact, 79% of employees who do not have access to caregiver support benefits. But again, I'm curious about where that comes from, because I honestly believe that there's a lot of things that just aren't being used. And less than 10% know about or avail themselves of EAP benefits. I'm sure John would tell you that that is a big truth because of the lack of robust benefits that somebody like his company provides, and because nobody's educating them about it. So what does that mean? It means benefits don't meet your caregiver's needs. That's what it means. And what does it also mean? It means we are actually funding the Great Resignation. That's what's happening. Everyone will tell you that a lot of this is because this Great Resignation is because people cannot find a work-life balance based on caregiving issues. Because if you go back to those demographics, it's affecting everyone. And it became so much to the forefront during the last 2 years. Next slide. So what can we do? Make those EAPs work for you. Look at them. Do they have what you want? Do you know what you need in your company? You may even be able to have a designated caregiver coordinator in HR. Somebody, God forgive, Esther mentioned an ombudsman, right? Somebody whose job is, in fact, to take care of caregiving, grief issues, divorce issues, right? Somebody who is definitely a soft skills person. But let me tell you something. As John had in one of his slides, I saw it there, soft skills. Soft skills means hard money. That's what it means to you as an employer, especially in today's world. And if you have women's initiatives, diversity and inclusion, if you look at, National Caregivers Month, which is every November, and do programs around that, you have things in place where we can open up these conversations, because we need to make focused time for conversations about these problems so that they are no longer a C-suite down, we didn't know we had a problem, or a frontline up, I can't talk about it, I'm afraid. Next slide. What can you do that might be an investment? You can consider additional paid caregiver PTO. Deloitte is probably the gold standard in this. Deloitte gives everyone 40 days PTO and then 16 additional paid weeks for caregiving, very much like a European model, right? There is something to be said for once you know the data around your company, looking at your PTO, in fact, and how it applies to caregiving. There are platforms out there that help people. There's apps that help people. There are things I'm sure all these benefits people know about that come in and continue targeting education about how to be a better caregiver and a better employee. You have to have less punishment and more open door so that you can retain, not the cost of retraining, because that is monumental to you. And I am telling you right now, recruiting around benefits has become, right, it's like 60 is the new 40, right? Recruiting around benefits has become much more important than recruiting around salary. I pretty much think the benefits people would agree with me on that. This is a key question when people are looking for a job, and the job market is so tight, you might want to be the forefront of that. Next slide. So I want you to know that Cathy Sikorski is not making this up. So you can just click, click, click there for me, Nancy. This is everywhere. Every one of these articles is in the last 2 years, right? It is everywhere about caregivers, why businesses need to support them, what businesses are doing about it, and why this is a hot button. Just yesterday, there was something in the New York Post about how caregiver burnout, and John is an expert on burnout, is really driving employment. So it's not just me, it's all 5 of us, and it's in your workplace. Next one. So where's the pot of gold at the end? It is proven that acknowledging your caregiver dilemma is going to, and giving them solutions, it's going to do these 6 things. All 6 of those things, I can almost guarantee that. There is, and not one of those things is something you don't want. So I would say, in the words of Socrates, one more click there, Nancy, the secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, stop fighting the old ways, but on changing the new and being a front runner in recognizing where these 5 conversations that we talked about today are things that are going to change the face of your workplace and make you a place where people want to come to work. Okay, next slide. This is everybody. This is how you contact us. Quick, take a screenshot, write it down. We're going to keep it up for a while. I guess during Q&A, we can do that. And know that all of us together, separately or whatever, bring something important to your workplace. And we would be more than happy to work with you to figure out how we can help you be the workplace that people want to go to.
I would like to thank everybody for joining us. We're going to open it up for questions and answers. We did run a few minutes longer. I'm going to actually stop this screen share. You will get a follow-up email in a couple of days. You will have the opportunity if you, come on, stop. You will have the opportunity if you want a copy of the recording or a copy of the slide deck to request that. Any one of us can send that to you, so you don't have to respond to my email by any stretch of the imagination. Reach out to the person you knew that invited you to this. But I would like to open it up for any questions if anyone does have any, because we covered a lot of information in a short amount of time. So any questions? It's going to require me to put my glasses on to actually read what somebody might have written. So we did get a very nice comment from Bob McCollins. Great content and sharing panel. Appreciate all of you. So if we do not have any more questions, we'll go ahead and let you guys get back to your day. But if you didn't get the message loud and clear, these issues are not going away. Plan rather than react is going to be one of your key things. Look at the policies you already have in hand, and communicate. You cannot communicate to your employees enough about these issues and any issues as well. So if you are unsure about how to do that, again, reach out to any one of us. We can give you some guidance on that. Also, I'm pretty sure we also made the point about employee assistance programs and how vital they are, especially now. Make sure the one you have addresses the needs that you want addressed, because it may or may not. So at least review what you have to determine if it's appropriate. So thank you so much. We'll be back on April 19th, I think was my date.
Nancy, we've got a question from
Yes.
Lisa Tenayuka Arias. She says, what is the best way to start if you know an employee is having caregiver issues but has not reached out to HR yet? And I think that's a perfect question for Cathy.
Absolutely.
I love that question. I would say, if you know, I'm assuming you're not the employee. And so the very first thing you should do is approach them. I'm assuming it's an approachable conversation, but you should tell them, look, you clearly are having caregiving issues. We have some solutions here, but we can't help you unless we know about it. And your hesitancy might be because if you know why they're hesitant, because you don't have a culture that supports them, you might need to give them some reassurance, right? So that you can, in fact, then tell them that HR has things in place that will be helpful to them. And I'm hoping that you're telling me this because you think that they just don't understand that there is, in fact, a supportive culture there. They're just afraid.
Great. Thank you for catching that, Allison. Again, our final session will be next month on April 19th, and we will be really talking to the employee. But as the employer, if you're here today, it will still be a valuable session for you, because sometimes it helps to hear it again from the other side of the table. So thanks, everyone, and we will see you next month.